History is shaped not only by kings and empires, but by moments of fire, when a single decision changes the course of the world. One such moment came in the year 711, when a man stood upon the shores of Iberia, his army behind him, the unknown before him. His name was Tariq ibn Ziyad. His men had crossed the sea from North Africa, landing on rocky ground that would one day bear his name, Jabal al-Tariq, the Mountain of Tariq, Gibraltar. And there, on that shore, he gave an order that would burn itself into history, destroy the ships. Indeed, Allah loves those who rely upon Him. Surah Al-Imran Al-319. Tariq was not born into power. A Berber by origin, he rose through the ranks not with wealth or titles, but with courage and ability. His loyalty to the governor Musa ibn Nusair and his devotion to the cause of Islam earned him command of a small but determined force. Beyond the sea lay the Visigothic kingdom of Hispania, fractured by civil strife, its throne contested, its people weary under corruption. It was an empire ripe for change, yet no one could have imagined that change would come from across the waters. The journey was perilous. The Strait of Gibraltar was a narrow but dangerous passage, the waves violent, the winds merciless. Yet Tariq led his men across in the dead of night, their ships creaking under the weight of warriors, their hearts steady with faith. By dawn, they reached the Iberian coast, a rocky mountain rising behind them, forests and valleys stretching ahead. They had crossed into a land unknown. Their numbers small, 7,000 men against a kingdom of tens of thousands. It was here that Tariq made his most famous decision. He ordered the burning of the ships. Flames rose into the sky, smoke drifted across the waters, and his soldiers watched in stunned silence as their only path of retreat turned to ash. Murmurs spread through the ranks. Some cried out in fear. How would they return if defeat came? Tariq silenced them with words that still echo across centuries. Behind you is the sea, before you is the enemy. By Allah, you have no choice but victory or death. The fire consumed the wood, but it lit the hearts of his men. With no way back, their resolve hardened. They were no longer soldiers with the option of retreat. They were warriors with only two paths, triumph or sacrifice. Tariq knew that hesitation kills armies, but desperation breeds courage. In burning the ships, he burned away fear. The news of their landing reached King Roderic of the Visigoths, who was already locked in internal wars for power. Furious, he gathered an army said to be more than 5 times the size of Tariq's. The two forces met at the banks of the Guadalete River, in the heat of summer, under a sky heavy with dust and anticipation. Tariq's men stood outnumbered, their armor lighter, their resources fewer. Yet their spirits burned with faith, sharpened by the knowledge that they had nowhere else to go. Tariq rode before his men, his voice carrying across the lines. He reminded them that this land was not sought for wealth or conquest, but for justice, for spreading the light of truth, for liberating a people weighed down by oppression. He spoke of paradise awaiting the martyrs, of victory promised to the steadfast. His words became fire in their veins, steel in their hands. The battle began with thunder. Visigothic cavalry charged, their heavy armor clashing against the lighter warriors of Tariq. But the Muslims moved with speed, striking with precision, breaking lines where the enemy least expected. Tariq himself fought in the thick of the battle, his sword flashing, his voice urging his men forward. The river ran red, the air filled with cries of war. As the hours passed, the tide shifted. The Visigothic lines faltered, their king's banner wavering. Some of his own lords betrayed him, resentful of his rule, abandoning him in the heat of battle. Tariq pressed the advantage, rallying his soldiers for a final push. With one thunderous charge, the Muslim army shattered the enemy ranks. King Roderic vanished, some say drowned in the river. others slain on the field, and his army scattered like leaves before the wind. The impossible had happened. 7,000 men had faced tens of thousands and emerged victorious. The road to Iberia lay open. One battle had toppled a kingdom, and at the heart of it all stood Tariq ibn Ziyad, the general who had burned his ships and ignited a conquest that would shape Spain for centuries. That night, as the wounded were tended and the fallen buried, Tariq looked across the land that stretched before him. Valleys rich with rivers, mountains crowned with forests, cities gleaming in the distance. A new chapter of history was unfolding. He knew this was not the end, but the beginning. Granada, Córdoba, Toledo, all lay ahead. Yet the greatest victory was already won, not only on the battlefield, but within the hearts of his men. For they had learned that when retreat is no longer an option, courage becomes destiny. The fire that consumed the ships did not end with the smoke. It burned through history, becoming a symbol of resolve, of sacrifice, of unwavering faith. To this day, when men speak of courage, they recall the shore of Gibraltar, the Mountain of Tariq, and the general who gave his soldiers no path but forward. There are battles that end wars, and there are battles that begin empires. The clash at the Guadalete River in the summer of 701 was both. It was here that Tariq ibn Ziyad and his small army, hardened by faith and sharpened by desperation, faced the full might of the Visigothic kingdom. Outnumbered, cut off from retreat, their only path was forward. What unfolded on that battlefield would not only decide their fate, but alter the course of history for centuries. Indeed, the party of Allah. They will be the successful. Surah Al-Mujadilah 58-20. The news of the Muslim landing had spread like fire through the hills of Iberia. King Roderic, newly risen to power amidst betrayal and rebellion, gathered his forces with haste. From every corner of his divided realm came soldiers, nobles and lords, some loyal, some reluctant, some already plotting treachery. They formed an army said to outnumber Tariq's by 5-1, their banners stretching across the horizon like a forest of steel. Tariq's men saw the vast host and felt the weight of fear press upon them. They had crossed the sea with nothing behind them but ashes, and before them stood a kingdom. Yet in their hearts burned the fire of resolve. Tariq rode among them, his voice steady, his eyes blazing. He reminded them that they had not come for plunder, nor for glory, but to break chains of oppression, to bring justice where corruption reigned. He pointed to the river behind them and the mountains ahead. By Allah, there is no return, he thundered, only victory or death. The two armies faced each other beneath the relentless sun. The ground trembled with the weight of cavalry, the air thick with dust and tension. Trumpets sounded, and the battle began. Roderic's cavalry charged, their heavy armor gleaming, their horses thundering like a storm. Tariq's lines braced, shields locking, spears steady. The first clash was brutal, steel against steel, flesh against flesh, the screams of men rising with the clash of swords. The Visigoths had numbers and weight, their knights pressing hard, but the Muslims had speed and faith. They darted between the armored lines, striking with precision, breaking gaps, and retreating before the heavy cavalry could respond. Tariq himself fought at the center, his sword flashing, his voice crying above the chaos, urging his men to stand firm. Hours turned to agony. The river ran dark, the ground littered with the fallen. At times, it seemed the Visigothic tide would overwhelm them. Yet within Roderic's ranks, betrayal brewed. Some of his lords, resentful of his rise to power, held back their strength, refusing to commit their full forces. Rumors spread that some even turned against him mid-battle, abandoning their king to his fate. Tariq seized the moment. He rallied his men for one final push, calling upon their faith, reminding them of the paradise that awaited the steadfast. With a cry that shook the battlefield, they surged forward. The Visigothic lines, already strained, buckled. Their formations broke, their cavalry scattered. King Roderic himself vanished in the chaos. Some say drowned in the river, others slain upon the field, his body never to be found. The collapse was complete. What began as a clash of armies ended as a rout. The Visigothic kingdom, once a mighty power, shattered in a single day. Soldiers fled into the hills, nobles scattered to distant fortresses, and the road to Iberia lay open. Tariq and his men, though bloodied and weary, stood victorious. That night, as they buried the martyrs and tended the wounded, Tariq walked among his men. Their faces were streaked with dust and blood, but their eyes glowed with triumph. They had faced impossible odds, and they had prevailed. The fire that consumed their ships now burned across a kingdom. The conquest of Iberia had begun. The victory at Guadalete was not only military, it was symbolic. A small force, guided by faith and resolve, had toppled a kingdom of decadence and betrayal. The world beyond the mountains would never be the same. Cities would open their gates, fortresses would fall, and within a few years, nearly all of Iberia would come under Muslim rule. But for Tariq, the victory was not pride but responsibility. He knew that with conquest came justice, that the sword was only the beginning. Ahead lay Granada, Toledo, and Córdoba. Ahead lay years of building, of governing, of proving that the light of Islam was more than fire on the battlefield. Yet for this moment, on the banks of the Guadalete, the general who had burned his ships stood as the man who lit the dawn of a new chapter in history. Some victories echo for a season, others thunder through centuries. The triumph at Guadalete was not the end of Tariq ibn Ziyad's journey, but the beginning of a storm that swept across Iberia, changing its destiny forever. With one kingdom shattered and its king gone, the doors of the peninsula swung wide open. The general who had burned his ships now marched deeper into the heart of Spain. And Allah will surely support those who support him. Indeed, Allah is powerful and exalted in might. Surah Al-Hajj 20:40. The road ahead was filled with opportunity and danger. The remnants of the Visigothic nobility retreated into their strongholds, hoping to regroup. Fortresses dotted the hills, and cities loomed with high walls. Yet with each step Tariq advanced, fear preceded him. The news of Guadalete spread faster than his army, carried by whispers and terrified survivors. Towns that had once flown the Visigothic banner opened their gates without resistance, preferring submission over destruction. Tariq's army, though weary, pressed on with resolve. They moved through valleys rich with vineyards, crossed rivers glistening beneath the sun, and climbed mountains that seemed to scrape the sky. At every stage, the land revealed its wealth: fertile fields, thriving towns, bustling markets. To men who had crossed the barren deserts of North Africa, Iberia was a land of unimaginable abundance. Yet Tariq reminded them constantly that they were not conquerors for greed. They were carriers of justice, of faith, of a new order that would replace corruption with fairness. The greatest prize lay ahead: Toledo, the capital of the Visigoths, the jewel of their kingdom. It was here that the nobles had once ruled in splendor, their palaces gleaming with gold, their churches filled with treasures. Now it stood vulnerable, its defenders shaken, its throne empty. Tariq advanced swiftly, seizing cities along the way: Granada, Córdoba, and others that would later become centers of Muslim Spain. His strategy was swift and precise: strike quickly, offer terms of peace, integrate the land without needless destruction. When Tariq entered Toledo, the city yielded. The great capital of the Visigoths, the seat of their kings, had fallen without a decisive battle. It was a moment that symbolized the end of an era and the birth of a new one. from the banks of the Guadalete to the heart of Spain. In less than 2 years, most of Iberia had come under Muslim control. But conquest was only the beginning. Tariq established order, ensuring that the conquered were treated with justice. Christians and Jews were allowed to keep their faith under the protection of Islamic law, paying tribute but free to worship. Markets reopened, fields were cultivated. Peace returned to cities once torn by Visigothic rivalries. The people, weary of corruption and oppression, found stability under the new rule. Yet even in triumph, Tariq's path was not without shadows. His commander and governor, Musa ibn Nusayr, crossed into Iberia with reinforcements, eager to claim his share of glory. Tensions arose between the general who had risked everything and the governor who now sought recognition. Together, they pushed further north, even into Gaul, but the seeds of rivalry were sown. In time, both Tariq and Musa were summoned to Damascus by the Umayyad Caliph. They stood not as independent conquerors, but as servants of the empire. Their achievements were celebrated, but their power was curbed. Tariq, the man who had lit the fire of conquest, faded from the stage of history. His final years quiet, his death unrecorded in grandeur. He had changed a continent, yet his own life ended in obscurity. Still, his legacy could not be silenced. For centuries, Muslim rule thrived in Al-Andalus, birthing cities of knowledge and beauty. Córdoba became a center of learning, Granada a jewel of architecture, Toledo a hub of translation where Greek wisdom passed into Europe. Philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and art flourished under the shade of a civilization that began with Tariq's landing at Gibraltar. Even in defeat centuries later, when the last Muslim kingdom of Granada fell, the memory of Tariq ibn Ziyad endured. The mountain where he burned his ships still bears his name, Gibraltar, Jabal al-Tariq, the Mountain of Tariq. His decision on that shore remains a symbol for leaders and warriors alike. When the path of retreat is destroyed, the only way is forward. The story of Tariq is not just of battle but of resolve. He was a man of humble origins, not born into crowns or riches. Yet he stood against kings and toppled a kingdom. He burned his ships not out of madness but out of vision, knowing that desperation breeds courage and that hesitation is death. His life reminds us that greatness is not in what one inherits, but in what one dares to do. Today, when his name is spoken, it carries the weight of fire. Tariq ibn Ziyad, the general who crossed the sea, who burned his ships, who faced an empire and prevailed. His story is carved not only into the stones of Gibraltar, but into the memory of history itself, a beacon of courage, faith, and resolve.